All right. Woo!
But the storm surge, especially on that right-hand side,
It's 150 miles an hour, just shy of a Cat 5.
Ian roared ashore in southwest Florida on the afternoon of September 28, 2022, as a 150-mile-per-hour Category 4. The onslaught of major hurricanes has been seemingly non-stop for the past 5 years. 2019 is the only exception, but Category 5 Dorian was so close to being yet another major disaster for the mainland, it all just sort of blurs together into one chaotic stretch. This hyperactive period of storms nearly looked as if it was coming to an end, as 2022 season started unusually slow. There wasn't a single named storm in all of August, something that's only happened one other time in the satellite era. It appeared we might be finally getting a break. As we got into late September, things finally started heating up. Fiona became the first chaseable storm as it marched towards Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. I opted to sit that intercept out, but a couple days later, the possibility of a secondary landfall in Nova Scotia caught my eye. Most models had the storm maintaining tropical characteristics until it was pretty close to land, and this would result in one of the strongest storms to hit that area in over a decade. I decided I was in for the ride. Alright, hurricane season is finally getting underway. It's been a slow start, but things are finally starting to ramp up. If you caught my live stream, I talked about how I was planning on flying out on Friday to go ahead and chase Fiona, but the storm is speeding up a little bit, and it's so wide that the effects are going to be felt far out from the storm, and I'm just getting a little nervous about my timing, so I am switching plans. I'm going on an earlier flight, which means I need to start getting ready right now and hit the road first thing in the morning. After landing in Halifax, I rented a car and made my way towards the Sydney area. Along the way, I met up with my old friend and storm chaser, Colt Forney, and we decided we'd chase together on this one. As we got near the oceanside community of Glace Bay, things started to go downhill. Before long, the winds were whipping at hurricane force. Power lines began arcing, and trees began falling.
oh my goodness.
After the storm began to wind down, I knew I needed to make my way back towards Halifax so I could find a flight to the US. During the drive, it became clear that the Cape Breton region was not the only area to receive major impacts from the storm. In fact, most of Halifax was still without power. I got extremely lucky and found a direct flight to Orlando. Over the past few days, we had been monitoring an invest that appeared to take a path into a very favorable area for development. As the days drew closer, alarm bells began ringing as more and more models were shifting the track of what was now Tropical Storm Ian closer to the western Florida coastline. Upon arriving in Florida, it was clear that people were bracing for the impact of a hurricane. But one of the things we started noticing was a lack of actual evacuation. There was more noticeable traffic heading away from the areas, but nothing like you'd expect for such a vastly populated area. This theme would unfortunately persist for the following day. I met up with Aaron Rigsby, who would be my chase partner for this trip, and caught some much needed rest at his aunt and uncle's house in St. Petersburg. They had actually taken the hit and gotten the heck out of there. The next morning was our day to scope out the area. We not only had to find out where we would ride out the storm, but also where we would put our unmanned surge probes. The trend had been that the hurricane would likely come in a bit further south, so we started making our way down the beach, with our final destination being the Fort Myers area. When we arrived on Fort Myers Beach, we immediately knew we would have to put a probe there. Not only was it just a mere 2 to 3 feet above sea level, but there was a noticeable lack of man-made or natural protection from the ocean. The orientation of the coastline also appeared extremely favorable for catching all the onshore flow that would be pumped in by the southeastern side of this storm. Our live stream captured as we made our way through the island, and it is very eerie, especially now knowing what would happen just 24 hours later. Probably pull up there. Just feet away from where we're at right now, a young couple living above a vacation rental business at 1450 Estero Boulevard would become integral in the story of this probe. Todd Pistone and Annette Ruskowski had lived there for the past year and were planning to ride out the storm. At that time, many still thought that the worst of the storm was heading towards Tampa and that the Fort Myers Beach area would receive lesser impacts.
So this is Fort Myers Beach, people. This is not going to be a pretty place to ride out the storm if it keeps on that southern trend.
After we finished scoping the area, we finalized all our preparations and headed to the hotel in Port Charlotte where we'd be staying. It was time to get out there and deploy the probes.
All right. Woo!
A special advisory is being issued to update Ian's forecast intensity. Recent NOAA and Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter flight level winds are as high as 160 knots. The forecast intensity is raised to 135 knots at landfall, and we are now forecasting catastrophic storm surge of up to 12 to 16 feet from Englewood to Bonita Beach, Florida. No other significant changes remain to the forecast. So that's right where our one probe is, because Englewood is just north of Fort Myers Beach, and Bonita is just south. So we have one probe in the absolutely catastrophic zone. We got an early start the next morning so we could figure out where to deploy our final probes and get the live stream up and running. We ended up putting one near the beach in Port Charlotte and another one near a construction site in Punta Gorda. Now, whenever we can safely do so, we like to try and get as close to the coast as we possibly can for the most intense winds. So we figured the Englewood area would be an ideal spot for us to ride out the storm. This area had the most intense convection on radar, and the flow here would also be offshore, meaning we wouldn't have to worry about getting inundated with storm surge. However, the same couldn't be said for the Fort Myers Beach area, which was starting to get raked with onshore flow from the southern eyewall. Our probe captured as surge began to inundate the area. Back in Englewood, things started getting hairy as the eyewall inched its way closer to shore. We were experiencing the full brunt of a Category 4, and we're right on the edge of the eye. However, it looked like it was going to pass just to our south. We decided to slowly make our way back towards Punta Gorda and try and center it. Meanwhile, Fort Myers Beach was being ripped apart with catastrophic surge. Todd, Annette, and their 2 dogs, Roxy and Jackson, were still in the house as it floated over Estero Boulevard. This was the same house they had called home for the last year, the same house that had been standing high above the water just hours earlier. In a last-ditch effort to survive, they jumped out the back bedroom window and attempted to cling on to anything that they could.
Almost completely calm. A little bit of wind, not much. In the eye of Hurricane Ian, Category 4.
We made our way back to the hotel in Port Charlotte to ride out the back half. This side of the hurricane is usually less intense, but an impressive convective blowup led to intense downdrafts and probably some of the highest wind gusts I've experienced in a hurricane.
About as good as we were getting it earlier, further west in Englewood.
He's gonna grab my umbrella.
The hotel was full of locals who could only watch helplessly as everything around them was torn apart, including the building we were all standing in. Portions of the roof were being ripped off, and water was leaking in all over the 2nd and 3rd story floors.
Oh, it's so bad. So bad.
What do you think? You stuff?
Oh my God, the rollaways.
Back in Fort Myers Beach, the surge was finally receding, but it looked like an absolute war zone. One can only imagine how difficult it would have been to survive in those conditions. In Port Charlotte, things were starting to improve as the storm moved on, but the power was still out and the hotel was leaking everywhere. Remember, at this time we still had no clue how bad it was in Fort Myers Beach and what our probes had captured. Our goal was to head out first thing in the morning to retrieve them and assess the damage.
Days. It is still September
27th,
28th.
28th.
And as you can see, we have no power. We actually had a really intense back side of the eyewall that we weren't expecting. So it actually ravioli tastes better in a cup versus a can, so you don't have like the tin taste. And then these are our SpaghettiOs that we got for a souvenir because you need a can opener to open that one.
Didn't think that through. Got a little bit of a leak. There's a small leak.
Is it an issue?
There's a small leak forming right above my bed. Oh, actually on the camera you can see how big it is.
Yeah.
It's only a drip right now.
The following morning, we packed up the car and said goodbye to the hotel staff that we had made friends with over the night. The first goal was to pick up the probes that had been deployed further north. The Port Charlotte one didn't capture much of anything, but the one in Punta Gorda did catch 2 cranes as they collapsed at the construction site near the bridge. We started making our way towards Fort Myers Beach, and reports were just starting to trickle in about how bad the area had been hit. Confidence was not high that we could safely make it there. The roads were filled with water, and we really didn't want to impede any of the emergency crews from helping out, so we proceeded cautiously. Somehow, we were able to navigate our way to the beach. There was barely any emergency personnel out there yet. Just 2 Coast Guard helicopters airlifting people out, and the island looked like a complete war zone.
There's the probe. We made it. Somehow.
It was heartbreaking watching people walk around aimlessly, looking for for any glimpse of hope that their property or loved ones had survived. I've truly never seen destruction to that capacity. So the next part of this story is probably about the most miraculous outcome one could have asked for, especially based on all the other tragedy that happened on Fort Myers Beach. I wanted to do this part unscripted because this was real and very impactful to a lot of people. And the story that we're about to share is probably one of the craziest survival stories that I've ever heard, especially something that I somehow captured. So obviously when we got back later that day, we pulled the footage from the probe, we put a few clips of it online, and some people started noticing that it looked like there was somebody still in the house. Now I hadn't noticed this when I was putting it together, but once I did, I started scrubbing back through the footage, just trying to see if maybe they left or if it was just a mistake or what. And I found out that it looked like there had been people in the house and it looked like they stayed. And at that moment, I was pretty convinced that I had just filmed somebody's last moments, posted it online, and it was going viral. And I cannot tell you how sick I felt to my stomach, how ashamed I felt of what I was doing, even though I knew the footage was important and would probably help people later down the line. Thinking that I posted somebody's last minutes and that their family was probably going to see it. And I don't know, I just didn't, it didn't sit well with me. But miraculously, the next morning, I got a message from somebody saying that they were the sister of the person that was in the house. And they told me this whole story about how they had survived and that they were in the hospital right now with minor injuries. And I just asked, what can we do? Can we do something to try and help out? I got in contact with the mother. They said, yeah, I mean, they have nothing. Everything's gone. So she kind of just put together a list of basic supplies and clothes and stuff. And Aaron and I found a Walmart in Tampa that was still open. And we just, got a car full and brought it down to them. And I mean, I literally had just thought this person had passed away. And now here we are about to go meet them. So we did meet them that day, but I was not going to shove cameras in their face because they were still obviously in shock and it was just not the right time. But thankfully, about 2 weeks later, we had stayed in contact and I asked them if they'd be willing to participate in an interview, and they wanted to share their story. They wanted to help somebody else further down the line. They know they made a bad decision staying there, and cast your judgment if you will. Regardless or not, they still lost everything. It would have happened had they stayed or had they left. And their story is truly miraculous. I can't even put into words what it must have been like going through what they went through. So we went back down there, we got a chance to hang out with them, then we set up some cameras and just let them tell their story from start to finish. So without any further ado, this is the true story from Todd and Annette themselves of what happened September 28th on Fort Myers Beach.
I've never been in Florida for an actual hurricane. I've been here for a couple tropical storms and some serious thunderstorms and stuff. Before the storm, it was supposed to go up and over us, like towards Tampa and just miss us.
During Irma, I was in Port St. Lucie, so it kind of went right over us, or around us really. And so I was like, it's gonna be fine.
I knew the water would come up because this storm surge, you hear about it all the time, but you don't know. Our house is already 7-8 feet off the ground. And I'm like, there's no way in hell it's gonna come from all the way down there where the beach is, 8 feet up into my house. There's no possible way,
That day, I got really nervous. A little late, I guess.
She woke me up around 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and she was like, we gotta go. And I was like, she said she's seen the water coming through the street a little bit. It wasn't even up above the curb yet. That's why you see me move the car across the street, because that was, in my head at the time, that was safe zone, It's not gonna get up from all the way down the beach, all the way up across the street. If I leave it here, the tires might get wet or something like that, you know. I didn't think like that would be the least of my worries, you know. Once the front door blew in, the glass in my front door blew open, I was like, uh-oh, we better get, I didn't know what to do. We were gonna go upstairs in the attic. I was just watching the water go from this much to this much to this, and that happened. It went from my ankles to my knees probably in like maybe like half an hour. And I see my neighbor's house floating right towards me. I thought when his house bumps into my house, it's gonna take the whole house out. And I was like, we gotta go, we gotta get ready. She already had a life jacket on because she put that on earlier, like as a joke.
But the life jacket, it had the pins on it. So I ended up tying them up with my bag. I put a tote bag, a Chewy tote bag, with all of our essentials, like our licenses and some random money, like credit cards, and then our phones.
She tied the dogs to her because my roommate had a wakeboard. You know the long rope that you hold on the wakeboard? She cut the wakeboard off she had a pocket knife. She cut the wakeboard rope off, tied it to one dog's collar and the other dog's collar, and then put it through her life jacket. And she went out the window because now I can feel the house is lifting up and slamming. You know, it's not even connected anymore. It's like boom, boom. And then I remember the last message I sent to my mom was, there's water in the house, the windows are breaking. And I said, I don't think we're gonna make it.
The second I jumped in, I got pulled under. So pretty much if I didn't have that life jacket, I buoyed, you know? And then my dogs are literally on top of me, like, while they're panting, they're like inhaling water and everything. And then it's like, I'm holding here with my leg in the window, holding on because he's still in there.
Pulled the window out, but then it went back underwater. And then I got pushed back up into the ceiling and I had to dive under the water and find that window and swim out of the window and come back up. Now I'm in front of the house that's going this way, pushing me across the street. And I gotta find her, and I'm screaming. I never screamed so much in my life.
I had the dogs. I don't even know. We were all just floating. There was no swimming. We were just floating with the house. I guess we crossed the canal.
And we just had no control over it. It's not like we swam to a perfect spot. We just got pushed. And she just grabbed onto the first tree, and there was a telephone pole in the water that I grabbed onto. But once I grabbed onto it, I looked at my arm was just bleeding, and I had no more energy to swim. My arms were tired, and I just let go, you know, and I just gave up. I was like, this is the way I'm gonna go. I didn't even have any energy. I don't know how I grabbed up, and I pulled myself up onto their back porch, and they had a door that didn't have glass on it, but the 2 glass windows on the side of the door. And I just picked up like a 4x4 that was floating in the water, and I just broke the side window and opened it, and I was like, hello, help, help, and there was nobody in there. Even in that house though, which was all the way on the other side of the canal, like if you look at a map of where we floated to, it was on the other side of the little canal. Even in that house, the water was still up to my knees when I got in there. And I just laid on the kitchen counter because everything else was underwater. I laid on the kitchen counter and I was like, man, my girl's still out there, my dogs are still out there. I don't know where, because you can't even see like 5 feet in front of you when you look out into that hurricane. And I'm like, man, there's no way. I'm 6'5" and I'm 225 pounds. If I had trouble making it, there's no way that they made it. For 3.5 hours, I was like, just in that house, just thinking like, damn, man. I was just coming to terms with the fact that I lost my girl and I lost my dog. That was the worst thing I ever felt in my life. But then 3 hours later, it became the most amazing miracle I ever seen float by like that. And I had no problem. I didn't care if there was glass or wood with nails. I didn't care what was in the water. I had to jump back in and pull them into that house. I don't care if I choke one of them. They're coming in the house with me, bro. I've been waiting 3.5 hours. Like, I can't even, I don't like thinking about it. And I can't believe that neither one of the dogs were limping or anything. They were in the tree with her like this for like 3.5, 4 hours. They had some scratches on them like everybody. She had so many bruises on her that her legs, she looked like she got beat with like a baseball bat, you know? As soon as they rescued us, they were like, thank God you guys alive. And they were like, your house is famous. And I was like, house is famous, how? They were like, it's all over YouTube, it's all over. And I was like, let me see this video. I didn't want to see it at first until we got all the way, after I got out of the hospital and stuff and I got stitched up. But We were just watching a video at first, like, how the hell did they get that camera up there? Where's that camera been? What is that camera pointed at my house for? But then I was like, I could only watch, at first, the first time I watched the video, I could only make it halfway through the video. Until I see the house stop moving, I couldn't watch it more. Because you watch the video, whatever level of water you see on the outside of the house, it's the same level of water inside the house. It's not floating like a boat like everybody thinks. If it's up to the roof in the outside, it's up to the roof in the inside. So when it's like all you see is the roof, I'm up against the ceiling. Where I was getting hit in the back with the dresser and everything, you know? No, I want people to see that video. I want everybody to know, like, that's what happens. Like, you can't stop the force of the water. And a storm surge, well, we're lucky to be alive. And I think about it every day. Like, if I would have just went 6 inches to the left or 6 inches to the right, we wouldn't be alive. We're lucky. But there's a lot of people, there's still hundreds of people that didn't get lucky, you know? People that didn't make it out, people that got crushed by the house because they weren't expecting that to happen. I want everybody to see that. Every single time there's a hurricane, even a Category 1 hurricane, if there's a little slight chance of a storm surge, show that video, because it'll happen, especially if you live on the beach. It's not if it'll happen, it's when it'll happen.